The Leave Your Legacy podcast is supported by Wise Financial. Wise Financial is a Northwestern Mutual private client group member. For over 20 years, Wise Financial has dedicated its efforts to designing comprehensive wealth management strategies for business owners and many accomplished athletes. Through their efforts, Wise Financial has been recognized as an industry-leading firm. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hello and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy Show. I'm your host, Kenyon Murray, and today as part of our entrepreneurial series, we're here at Daydrink, where Ian Castillo is really taking an eco-friendly look upon the world and what you guys are doing. So hope you enjoy the episode.
All right, well, welcome back. And now our next guest is Ian Castillo. He is the owner, or one of the owners, of Daydrink Coffee in Iowa City. But Ian, let's give our viewers a little bit of a background and how you came to be where you are today, like where you grew up, school, all those kind of things.
Yeah. I guess I went to school in Iowa. Mm-hmm. So that was about a decade ago. Mm-hmm. So I've been in Iowa City for about a decade, and then before that I was in Burlington. Okay. So about an hour and a half south of Iowa City. Yeah. And then post college, I kind of my first job was working at a bank. Okay. I hated it. Like the idea of doing the same thing over and over again just doesn't appeal to me very well. So I think I've just been chasing the idea of finding something different to do. Yeah. And from there got into startups, building businesses, and I've been a part of different things, been building different things. None of it really makes sense, looking ahead. But looking back, it does. Yeah. So yeah, you fast forward a decade, and I've had everything from being a COO at a food delivery startup. We were doing a lot of growth and revenue during the pandemic. Head of growth at a tech company doing analytics for publishing platforms. Okay. I was a product developer. And then, more recently I was a product manager and designer at an AI company. Okay. So kind of a lot of randomness. Man, no, I was as you were talking, I was thinking about myself, like I've done all these little different things, but if, like you said, looking back on it, where you are now, looking back on it's like all those things we're building for you to get to where this I'm at point. Right now. Yeah, absolutely. So that's really cool to see. And so, that being said, have you always kind of had this entrepreneurial spirit, or has it been something that, as you got older and trying to, like you said, figure it out, it was okay, I don't like this. I don't like the 9 to 5 clock punching. I want to do something different and be my own boss. I have always thought that doing something different was kind of like the North Star. Right. I don't mind the idea of having a boss or being a boss. I think for me, what was more important was just the freedom of being able to do, I don't want to say whatever I want throughout the day, but to be able to dictate my schedule, right. Rather than have my schedule be dictated for me. Yeah, gotcha. I feel the same way. It's really weird. And it's funny because I look back on it, and maybe you did the same thing. When you were, let's say, just say punching the 9 to 5, mm-hmm. You were, there were times you were busy, and now that you're in your own boss, I feel like I'm busier now, but because I can control my schedule and my time, it's not as overwhelming as if I was being told, hey, you clock in at 9, you clock out at 5. Is that kind of the same feeling you got? I get the idea that I miss, so it's going to sound weird, but I kind of miss the 9 to 5 in a sense that once 5 o'clock hits, you don't have to think about anything anymore. Right? 5:01 hits, you can binge watch Netflix, you can eat, you can do regular people things, right? The moment that you become an owner of something, it doesn't stop. There's no 5 o'clock hits, that's not my problem. It's you answer to your partners, your staff, the customers, your investors, your other business relationships. Yeah. So it's unending. Gotcha. Yeah. Well, like you said, I mean, being your own boss has its ups and it obviously has its downs. So with you, let's talk a little bit about,
couple of your current projects. Well, you have Daydrink Coffee, which I was actually introduced to through Sophie and Chris, which is pretty cool. Had never heard of it. Talk about Daydrink, kind of how that got going and a little bit about it, because you guys are doing some really, really unique things when it comes to our environment and things like that. So
so we're just at the 3-year mark, 3 years of being in business. I joined several months later. So while I'm a co-founder or co-owner, Michael and Connor were the ones that started it. And how we look at things is a little bit different than other coffee shops. Yes, we want to tell you that we have, incredible coffee, but everyone will say that. For us, it comes down to like the sustainability component. So we use glass jars for all to-go containers. We, of course, encourage you to bring your own cup, right? But at the end of the day, plastic can take anywhere from 50 to 500 years to decompose, depending on the type of plastic. So our ethos kind of focuses on, if we didn't have to put plastic in the environment to begin with, that doesn't have to, you don't have to worry about it necessarily, compared to like glass jar. It's a closed loop. You think about us when you take that glass jar home, it's yours, you bought it. If you want to bring it back and get, $1 off, then you're helping us create like a circular economy in a sense.
Right.
So I think the Iowa City community and, at a larger audience, like globally, like really appreciates that idea because it's not easy to do.
Right. And, thinking about that is like, there had to be a lot of forethought in, okay, if we're going to do this, like what's going to be kind of our foundation, our beliefs. And like you said, you came in a little bit later, but can you talk a little bit about like why Daydrink wanted to be this eco-friendly type of coffee house? Obviously, like you said, it works. They think about it, they bring it back, bring the glass jar back in, but talk a little bit about like, what was the thought behind like, yes, this is like, we're going to be eco-friendly moving forward, or with this coffee house, we're going to be eco-friendly?
I think it goes down to wanting to do things that are different. Right. How do you stand out amongst other places that also sell coffee? Some places are offer different drinks or different vibes, right? Or some we have parking, or we have like more accessible more to like downtown traffic. But at the end of the day, like if you're taking a glass jar home, like you're still thinking about us, right? And you're reusing it to hold your pens or your buttons or your paper clips or whatever, right? Like there's a consistent top of mind that you don't get if you're throwing away paper or plastic cup.
Gotcha. I love that. A little marketing genius there too. Yeah, I love it. So you guys were in a shared space first, and you guys have gone into a standalone. So what was the thought behind where you're at as far as foot traffic and things like that? And why not stay in a shared space? When you look to expand it, like a lot of times, if you look at those kind of things economically, it makes sense. But what was the thought behind, okay, we're good, but we have to have our own standalone, and this is where it's going to be?
Yeah, I think our, looking back, our plan was to always want to grow. And for us to grow, we needed to find a space that we could call our own. We initially started and we still are to this day, in the Ped Mall.
Gotcha.
So we had a lot of support from Simeon Talley and Basic Goods while they were, habitants, if you will.
Yeah.
So can't thank him enough for giving us that opportunity. And our focus to grow, we can only grow so much in like a tiny corner, right? So once we decided that was the next step, looking for a place that kind of fit who we were as people, and that our new location, 518 Bowery Street in Iowa City, it is kind of like the love at first sight, but then the more we learned about the building, the more we like, oh, this is like really perfect. Because this is our first Iowa City co-op.
Okay.
So I feel like we're kind of continuing this like lineage of taking care of the community in different ways.
Gotcha. And so being that it was the first Iowa City co-op, you probably already had people that were familiar with it and the traffic, because we were talking a little bit off air and you were saying how now it's a great place to be because people don't have to maybe go downtown and deal with that. They can just pop over to Daydrink and get their coffee fix.
Yeah. I think we're at not two different audiences necessarily. You know, when you're in the Ped Mall, there's a lot of college kids walking by.
Right.
And we are surrounded by a lot of college students that, you know, are in the apartments nearby. But we were also seeing a lot of families starting to kind of like learn about us. And, you know, I think they're more quick to stop by our Bowery location than, you know, find parking,
Gotcha.
You know, in the parking ramp, and then, you know, navigate through, you know, if it's a game day, it might be a little bit difficult to get through in the Ped Mall.
Yeah.
So I think as we kind of grow, we're gaining different people, different audiences that may not have initially maybe been interested in going down the Ped Mall.
Gotcha. Well, obviously expansion is always, there's the highs and the lows, and there's some roadblocks at times. What were some of the, I guess, maybe not so fun things that you had to deal with when it came to expanding and having your own standalone spot?
I think some of our biggest headaches, managing growth. That's probably one of them. So, you know, the more, and this is what I mean when I said earlier, where using glass jars can be difficult. It's drastically more expensive to buy a pallet of glass jars than it is to buy a sleeve of paper cups. Right. So there's a lot of upfront capital that we have to kind of use to, in a way that, like, you know, other places would use that same capital elsewhere.
Right.
So for us, that, you know, the more we grew, we have to manage kind of capital allocation.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of a challenge. And then trying to convince people to use glass jars is probably the other one.
Really? Yeah.
And it's not, in hindsight, it makes sense, right? But people have, when you're so habitual, and coffee is a very habitual thing, right? Right? That the moment that, you know, we ask, like, have you heard about our glass jar program? And they say no, and we get the opportunity to talk to them about why we're doing what we're doing. We've had a couple of people who are like, why are you giving me my coffee in a glass jar? Like that, like to them is like scratching the head. But to take people out of their routine, and then challenge them on their assumptions, and challenge them on their habits, and say, like, hey, like, there's a better way to do this. And, you know, we're just trying to make our dent in the community in a positive way. People kind of then relax and go, oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah. And, you know, from there, we're able to encourage them. I mean, how many like to-go cups do you have at home, right? They're just collecting dust. Right. You know, like put it in your car and let's start using it.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I think usually college towns, and I know Iowa City, having gone to the University of Iowa myself, you can test different things and challenge people differently. I think that's the one thing that we as human beings have a hard time, is like getting out of our comfort zone. So even those conversations that you're having, they're challenging that mindset to, I mean, I look at it like this, like, let's be better, let's do better, you know, when it comes to the economy. So I think if there's any place that you could do this and challenge people, would be in Iowa City or in a college town. So it's amazing that you're doing that. And the fact that you're growing shows that people are kind of like, okay, yeah, I can do this and maybe get out of my comfort zone, be stretched a little bit, be challenged a little bit. And I think that's a unique thing to have from a business. So, you know, kudos to you and, you know, everyone involved to doing that. But I think you're in a good place to really challenge people day to day.
Yeah. Thank you. I hope that we can continue to do it without alienating, you know, people in the process.
Gotcha. So we talk about it. I mean, you've done a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Startups are, kind of your thing. And I know you have some outside Daydrink things that you're doing. So tell us a little bit about how you are helping other people get started with their own businesses.
Yeah. So I also run a consulting design, studio, Space Pirate Labs, which it has it's kind of like a catch-all for everything else I do.
Yeah.
So one of my clients, University of Iowa, so I work as a adjunct and help the John Papa John Entrepreneurial Center and their startups and their marketing needs.
Oh, wow.
So all the startups in the incubator, they'll come to me and say like, we need help with marketing. This is where we're at. And usually a lot of my conversations start with like, well, where do you want to go? And let's figure out how to get there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Do you think that's a tough conversation? Because I think a lot of times people, they want to do something, but they don't look past maybe the next week or the next month. And you're probably looking like years in advance as far as like kind of how do we get there and build this plan to get there? Do you find like, do you have to kind of expand people's vision of where they want to go? Or do you feel like they come in kind of knowing and, you're just a definite add-on or I guess, you're with your knowledge, you're literally helping them. But do you feel like people that want to start up, they have more of a narrow vision as far as where they think they can go?
I think some of it starts with challenging the assumptions that this is the business they want to build.
Right.
A lot of in my experience, a lot of the students are doing it because like, oh, like it'd be fun. And, there's other students that, this is like when I graduate or leave school, this is the thing I want to work on. I don't want to go apply a bunch of different places.
Right.
So the idea that I can say like, like, where do you want to take this? Mm-hmm. Whatever they say, I like to question them and ask like, like, tell me more, like, right. Like really, like, let's peel this back because sometimes I don't think they imagine big enough. And other times I think their imaginations need to be like narrowed in a little bit. Right.
Yeah.
So that can be, really encouraging and challenging at the same time.
Yeah. I was talking to someone the other day and we were talking about if your dream doesn't scare you, then it's not big enough.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's one of those things that once again, it's hard for us to take that in because it's like, we like being staying in our lane. We like being comfortable, but that's the one thing too, is people have to understand that any venture like this, if you want, to start your own thing, there's going to be those moments where you're scared. Honestly, I will every so often I'll have that imposter syndrome of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not supposed to be, where I'm at. And then every so often I get that validation, either internally or externally, where there's a signal that says like, oh, like you are on the right path. You are doing it. A couple of months ago, I got asked to be on the advisory board for South by Southwest. Yeah.
And that was like a signal for me. I was like, oh, like they just wouldn't ask like
anybody. Yeah, right.
So like that to me was like, okay, like I do know what I'm talking about. Yeah. Like, it's a nice reassurance. I think everyone needs that.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about reassurance. I was just thinking back to, and we'll talk a little bit about it because Chris and Sophie are involved with Daydrink. But I remember even back in high school, Chris, very good college or high school player, obviously in college, and he's in the pros now. But I remember like him directly telling me, hey, like I need a little bit of like positive reinforcement because I was their coach. And so I think that happens in any way, especially if like you're maybe doubting or, I'm not sure we're supposed to do this, but then like that validation part of it is pretty cool. And it can come in that form. It can come in the form of, revenue. It can come in so many different ways, but I think that what you're talking about is a direct reflection of how people value you. The things you've done have been really successful, and it's just another way to honestly honor you for what you're doing, for the community, for what you're doing for your ownership group, what you're doing for your staff. Like that's pretty cool to be able to be recognized like that.
I think it's important to, know like you don't need like outside validation necessarily, but there are times where you almost need to get out of your own head and just shut off the noise and let someone tell you like, hey, like you're good. Yeah. Like you will be good. Like, and there's a countless amount of people that have like kind of like got me back onto like the path of like that I was on. So it's good to have good people in that corner. And like Chris and Soph, right? Yeah. Like Soph herself, be a huge advocate of Daydrink and has always been like, you got this.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. No, we definitely need that positive reinforcement. So I want to go just a little bit more into this. So young person, 20s, early 30s, whatever it is, they come to you and say, hey, you've been so successful. Like what would be recommendations you would give them, or what would you tell someone, and someone else that's looking at starting their own company or doing those kind of things? What would be some advice that you would give them?
If you're looking to start a company, I've always been a big advocate of, just fall in love with the problem, not the solution. So what I mean is, if you're, really big into like sustainability, right? Don't only do one thing that like you think is solving it, right? Like continuously iterate and find ways that will ultimately like fix the problem. Right. When you fall in love with the solution, you can kind of get blinders on the idea that like, oh, it's working because of, these like very narrow metrics. But at the end of the day, if like you take a step back and look at the problem as a whole, is like, well, if it isn't still fixed, then you haven't really fixed it. It's like false positive. So the other part is that it can be difficult to get into like starting a business if you don't know what you're doing. Right. So I think it's important to surround yourself with people who aren't necessarily yes men, challenge, surround yourself with people who will be honest with you and like tell you how it is, even if you don't want to hear it. Yeah. I've had a lot of mentors tell me something that, I didn't agree with at the time. Yeah. And, historically their track record has been better than mine. So I've learned to say, oh, well, you've been right every other time so far. So I guess I should take that advice.
That's awesome. No, I think we all need people around us like that, to challenge us and to hold us accountable for different things, but also to have our best interest at heart. And like you said, sometimes it's a very difficult conversation, or I wouldn't even say a not difficult conversation, but just difficult to kind of hear. And then, okay, what are we going to do with the feedback that we just got? And that's important too, that you take that feedback and use it in a way that's going to benefit you moving forward.
It's one thing to hear something and say like, oh, okay, like, I needed to, what I heard was X, but what I'm going to go do is Y, and, feedback is just that, right? Like you don't have to listen to it. You don't necessarily have to like do everything that someone says, but at the end of the day, I think it's important to recognize, what are you hearing and, where is their perspective coming from? Right. Where is your perspective coming from? Sometimes I think that needs to be reframed a little bit.
Gotcha. Well, every show I do rapid fire questions. So we're gonna throw some at you here to kind of wrap up the segment. So first one, cake, pie, or cookie?
Pie.
Pie?
Yeah.
You have a favorite pie?
I just had a blueberry pie shake from Hamburg Inn. Oh my gosh.
Blueberry pie shake. Okay.
Yeah. Go try it.
Okay. Awesome. Okay. If you could switch places with anyone for a month, who would it be and why?
Oh man. Well, I'm gonna have to go with Chris. I gotta go with Chris. Yeah. I actually texted him earlier this week. I was like, hey, like I'm gonna be on like your dad's show. It's like any advice on how to talk to him? He's like, oh no, he's smooth. Like you'll be all right. You know?
He gave you some props.
Yeah,
right.
He gave you your flowers. Like you know.
Yeah, they won't give them to me to my face though.
You know what though? You got to get him where you got to go where you can get him, and you know that's. No, he gave you your ups. So
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I said the same thing. Just like to trade places with a NBA player and having two, I'd trade places with Chris or Keegan just to kind of see how it is to be an NBA player for a month.
Yeah, cool. I mean, you know, I can't shoot for anything, but you know, just you know, I think just being in that idea of like, you know, it's the farthest thing from startups. You know, and I think it's good to get out of that bubble.
Gotcha. Yeah. All right, last one.
Yeah.
If you could travel anywhere and spend a week, where would it be?
You know, it's getting a little cold, so I have to say like Mexico City or something.
Okay.
Like somewhere warm, something that's just, you know, a nice like 75 and sunny, and
I like that.
Put me next to a beach right now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'd probably pick somewhere warm too. All right. Well, Ian, I want to thank you for coming on the show today. This has been unbelievable. Hopefully our audience has learned a little bit more, not only about Ian and Daydrink, but just about the process of becoming an entrepreneur. And there are people out there that are willing to help you if you have questions. So give us, what's the website again for your startup company that you help with startups?
SpacePirateLabs.com.
SpacePirateLabs.com. This podcast is sponsored by Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that specializes in creating high-quality video, photo, and audio productions for local businesses. Not only that, but they also produce a number of podcasts, including this one. So if you're interested in sharing the story of your business with the world, contact them today by visiting StorylineMultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters.